The Gray Man, also known as Minimalist Prepper. The most important thing this operator ever did was remove himself from the target list before any threat developed. Everything else is secondary to that. The logic is almost embarrassingly simple. If nobody knows you have anything worth taking, nobody comes for it. In a degraded environment where desperation drives most hostile action, obscurity is a first-line defense that no amount of firepower can fully replace. EDC philosophy runs deep here. Nothing on the body that causes a second look. Nothing a standard commuter wouldn't carry. Blending means blending, not wearing a subdued version of the same kit everyone else recognizes. The discipline of concealment is an active skill, not a passive one. You're not just forgetting to stand out. You're actively working not to. Strengths. Never hands out the map that gets him robbed. Psychologically stable. Depends on no one's approval. Rattled by nothing external. Weaknesses. The same wall that keeps threats out keeps allies out too. 1 week of isolation is manageable. 1 year demands a network, and networks require transparency. There's also a hard ceiling on solo capability. Over time, the discipline of concealment becomes indistinguishable from loneliness, just better rationalized. The urban prepper made a deliberate decision. Movement during a crisis equals exposure, and exposure is how people get hurt. So, they built a position instead of an exit plan. The military concept of hull down is the right frame here. A tank positioned so only its strongest, most armored surface is exposed. Applied to residential survival, minimize visible vulnerability, maximize depth of supply, and let the crisis pass over you while others scramble in the open. This isn't passive. A serious holdout has light discipline protocols for grid-down conditions, reinforced entry points, a deep pantry calibrated to a 12-month horizon with a rotation schedule, stored water calculated per head per day with filtration backup, solar-fed battery bank running a chest freezer, rain catchment into a multi-stage filtration setup, an indoor growing operation, microgreens, hydroponic lettuce, herbs, bridging the gap between stored food and anything outdoor being viable again. Strengths. When shelves empty on day 3, this operator is already set, not reacting, watching from a prepared position, while others make predictable, desperate mistakes. The residence functions as a genuine operational base. Weaknesses. The strategy assumes the location stays viable. A flood, a fire, hostile attention directly on the position. Any of it dismantles years of work in hours. There's also a visibility problem over time. In a neighborhood of dark, empty houses, one with lights and cooking smells is conspicuous. The fortress eventually announces itself, and a fortified position with no rehearsed exit isn't a fortress. It's a trap. Everything the bug-out prepper owns moves in under 3 minutes. That's a rehearsed number with a stopwatch attached to it, not an estimate. They've memorized exits from every city they frequent. Primary bug-out location, 2 backups, pre-positioned caches. But the bag is only the surface layer. Underneath it is genuine wilderness capability, the kind that functions when every modern system has failed. How to make fire from friction under wet condition. What debris to use for shelter. Find water sourced by reading terrain and vegetation, not just filtered from whatever's nearby. These aren't YouTube skills. They've been practiced, failed in training, corrected, and retested before they needed to work under real pressure. That distinction matters enormously. Strengths. Mobility is a genuine advantage when staying is more dangerous than leaving. This operator has thought about that problem harder than almost anyone and built real capability around it. Decisive under pressure. When others are still debating whether it's serious enough to act, this person is already moving. Weaknesses, optimized so hard for departure that nothing permanent was ever built. At some point, the movement stops, and they haven't prepared for what comes after. A bag isn't a homestead. Speed isn't a food strategy. Critically, bushcraft has hard limits in high-density collapse scenarios. In an overwhelmed area, every other mobile person is competing for the same game trails, the same deadwood, the same water. Skill without supply depth hits a ceiling, and it arrives faster than expected. The technical intelligence operator approaches every problem the way an engineer reads a system, methodically, skeptically, and with attention to cascade failures. They hold an amateur radio license, run a scanner, and have quietly mapped communication infrastructure across their operating area. A satellite communicator lives in their daily carry, not in a drawer at home waiting for an emergency. Their gear has been researched, stress-tested, and understood before it was ever trusted. They don't own equipment they can't fully operate. The serious edge of this type has moved into offline knowledge infrastructure. A ruggedized laptop running a compressed local AI model provides medical decision support, technical reference, and planning assistance with zero network dependency. The full offline Wikipedia archive fits on a 100 gigabyte drive. Add a curated medical library, mechanical repair database, and regional field guides, You have a functional technical brain that requires no signal and no external infrastructure. Strengths: usually the calmest person in the room during a crisis, because they watched it developing before it arrived. Their awareness lead time is measured in hours or days, not minutes. Technical knowledge doesn't expire, can't be confiscated, and compounds in value over time. Weaknesses: what happens when there's no electricity? That is the critical vulnerability. Almost everything in this operator's capability stack depends on power, and physical readiness receives almost none of the attention. This type is frequently underprepared for basic field demands: carrying load over distance, physical confrontation, manual labor under stress. Intelligence without the physical capacity to act on it is an expensive frustration. There's also a risk of over-engineering problems that have blunt, simple solutions. The community prepper made the bet most solo preppers quietly avoid. Other people are an asset, not a liability. While others are reinforcing their doors, the community operator is learning who on their street has medical training, who keeps a deep pantry, who can fix engines, and who has skills worth coordinating with. They build what are called mutual aid groups, small trust-based networks of households with complementary skills and resources, some formal with written resource sharing agreements and defined roles. They run neighborhood watch rotations framed as community safety, skill sharing sessions framed as social gatherings. They know which neighbors can be trusted and which ones will become a problem, and they've thought carefully about both categories. Strengths: relationships built before a crisis are among the highest value preparations available, and the rarest because they take years of consistent investment. The network creates genuine redundancy, distributed skills, shared resources, coordinated threat response. In a scenario measured in months rather than days, this is the type most likely to still be functioning at the 12-month mark. Weaknesses: capability depends on other people following through, and people are unpredictable under real deprivation. A network built on goodwill can fracture exactly when resources become scarce and self-interest takes over. Building trust also requires revealing yourself, and not everyone brought into the circle deserves to be there. The armchair prepper knows everything, in theory. This one is uncomfortable to write because every serious operator has a version of this in their history. They can cite caloric density of freeze-dried meal options, discuss defensive caliber terminal ballistics, and explain precisely why one water filter outperforms its competitors across 3 separate failure modes. The research is real. The browser has 47 open tabs, and the backpack is in the closet. Somewhere in their residence, in original packaging, sits a trauma kit, a water filter, a hand crank radio, and a fire starting kit that has never produced a flame outside a manufacturer's demonstration video. Strengths: the knowledge base is genuinely real and valuable, not yet activated. This type also tends to be the person who finally convinced a spouse or sibling to take preparation seriously, because they understand the reasoning well enough to explain it clearly. Weaknesses: in a real scenario, this type function a well-organized target. All the gear is there, carefully researched, and completely accessible to the first person willing to apply physical force to acquire it. A well-stocked kit, without the skills to employ it under stress, is just a very efficient donation.